Hi there. Welcome to the Big Sky Investor podcast and YouTube show. I'm your host, Luke Anderson, and you are joining me for episode number 2. Very excited to be here with you again today, and I'm excited about the topic I'm going to talk about. First, I just wanted to give a shout out and a thank you to the men and women in uniform, our first responders, our policemen and women, firefighters, EMTs, and all the families that support our military personnel and first responders. You all sacrifice every day to make our world a better place, whether that's in our communities, on the state level, or the federal level. So thank you very much for your sacrifices that you make every day. All right, so we are, like I said, on episode 2 and of the Big Sky Investor podcast. And the purpose of this show is to document my journey as a new real estate investor and go through some of the things that I'm going to be learning as a real estate investor. And we'll also talk about things that, or I guess I'll talk about things that are related to business that I've learned over the years being involved in different businesses. My interests are not exclusive to real estate, but we'll talk about that as well. And there'll be some interviews with people in the industry, both locally and nationally. But my hope with this is to help people in my local market, in the Montana market where I live, that want to invest, or maybe they're already in the real estate industry and they maybe I can help them have a different perspective on the industry, seeing it from, maybe it's a realtor or something like that, looking at it now from the perspective of an investor. Or maybe it's somebody not in Montana and I can provide them some value that helps them to go out and take action and go invest or take the next step in their business, whatever that may look like. So my ultimate goal is just to provide value to whoever I can. That's what my hope is. Also, it's a way for me to document what I'm doing, and I think it will be beneficial to look back on and see where I came from. So, anyway, so today I wanted to talk about learning. I kind of mentioned in the last episode that I started really diving into the real estate realm I think it was about 10 months ago or something like that, end of 2017, and had been around it I've been around the industry my whole life with my grandfather and then hearing about my mother being a realtor back in the day. But then I've had friends and known people in the industry and worked with someone who went from the corporate job to real estate. So I've kind of been around it in various seasons of my life. Never really understood it. I got the overall concept of real estate right on how to make money, but didn't really realize that there's so many different ways to do it other than become a realtor, list a house, sell a house. There's a lot more that goes into it, and lot of people service that industry. So anyway, overall, didn't really fully grasp the concept of being a real estate investor for a long time. Was not interested in it, but saw that it could be a vehicle to achieve what I want to achieve, which is financial independence for my family and generational wealth. You look at it statistically, and it has helped create more generational wealth than any other industry in the world. So anyway, that all of a sudden became appealing to me, even though I never thought the industry was sexy, right? So started learning about it more, really starting to really understand the different ways that I could be involved in the industry as an investor, as someone who does not have a realtor's license. seeing the more creative side of real estate. So started doing that, started following people, groups, learning, educating myself. And I've really taken the stance of a student these last several months, trying to train myself to be able to play in this industry, right? To be able to partake in this industry. And it's been interesting because it what I've really liked about it is I've been able to learn the way I like to learn. So I've been able to meet with people, sit down with people, have, lunch, have coffee, do webinars, be as face-to-face as possible with people, which is how I learn best, having conversations. And I've been able to do that. I'll go and have a conversation with a lender, so I can learn the lending side of it. I've, go and talk with venture capitalists, talk with, private money, talk or private lenders, talk with realtors, talk with insurance agents, property management, contractors, people that service the industry, right? Property owners. And so I can get a better grasp of every piece. Not that I need to understand every piece. I'm not a detailed person. As you can probably see, my office is kind of a mess right now in the background. It's kind of a mess, and I'm not a detailed person. But if I understand a little bit of a lot of different things, then that helps me, especially in the real estate realm, to understand what I need to do in order to achieve my goals. It also helps me be more relatable to people because I understand a little about a lot. And that's kind of that concept is kind of what inspired this episode. I did a little thing on Instagram about this, but one of my grandmothers, we call her Granny. She's gonna be 88 soon, and her in my mind, her biggest legacy that she is going to leave is she is going to leave a legacy of mindset, training, and learning. Not necessarily formal education, learning. Because her message to us, I'm very close with my granny. I lived in the same house as her for 15 years of my childhood, and so I had a daily interaction with her pretty much. It was about every day. And her and my grandfather bought me my first computer, as well as my sister and my cousin. It was very important to them that we had the tools to constantly be learning. And of course, they wanted us to go to college and things like that, but they were more concerned about learning every single day and getting into the habit of learning and educating ourselves on life, on different things in our world, so that we can constantly be in a state of learning and education, so we can constantly be growing and bettering ourselves, and in turn bettering our sphere, the people that are in our lives that are close to us, and also the people we come in contact with. I mean, that makes sense, right? That's a pretty good way to help other people in a very unconscious manner that could be very impactful, right? So the whole idea of learning and elevating ourselves so that we can help elevate the people around us. So that has been she's taught me a lot of things, but that's probably been my biggest takeaway from my granny, is that you have to always be learning, never stop learning. Every day, learn something new. And one of the ways that I've seen this really benefit me, both as like a high school student, even back as far as middle school, but in high school, college, and the older I get, the more it helps, is I genuinely take an interest in other people, in other industries, in things that I'm not familiar with. Because I take a genuine interest, like I said before, I'm not a detailed person, so I don't need to know all the nitty gritty of everything, or the mechanics of everything down to a T, but I need to understand the concepts, right? And I need to understand the important factors that go into that. By learning that, I've learned a little about a lot of different things. So when I'm engaged in a conversation with somebody, chances are one of two things is going to happen. One, I know enough about their industry or what they do or the background that they had. Maybe they grew up like in a farming background or something like that. I know enough that I can have I can sound semi-intelligent about it, or ask, intelligent questions, even though I can be like, I'm not totally familiar, but I know about this aspect. How does this aspect relate to the rest of your industry? Whatever. That allows me to start the conversation and dive deeper with that person. So that's one thing, is that I know enough to have an intelligent conversation with them and to relate to them on what they do or have experienced or whatever it may be. The other thing that could happen, excuse me. The other thing that could happen at number two is that I know nothing about the industry, but I've asked enough people about things that I don't know, that experience has been ingrained in me, that I know how to ask questions that will still get the conversation going, even though I have no idea anything about the industry. But I'm going to learn. I'm taking the stance of, hey, I'm genuinely interested in you and what you do. I have no idea how it works. Explain it to me. I want to learn. And people love to explain most of the time, unless it's, something super unique and they're like, oh, I have to explain this for the 10th time in the last 5 minutes. But anyway, most of the time people are like, oh yeah, well, this is how this works, blah, 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 and they'll give a general overview. And that usually gives me enough so that I can have a conversation, or maybe I'll learn enough about it. So the next person I meet that's in that industry, I can say, well, I learned about this from somebody I met. How does this is this similar to what you do? Or is this how it relate to you? Or, anyway, it's allowed me to have a lot more conversations, is my point, because I've been able to be relatable and I've had experiences with people in a variety of different industries. So it's allowed me to talk with more people, I think. So, and I wouldn't have that in my tool belt if I wasn't constantly in a state of learning, if I wasn't constantly trying to learn new things and take interest in people. So I think that's crucial to anything that you do. It applies to everything. I was going to say something more profound than that, but it applies to everything you do, right? You have to engage with people on some level, no matter what you do. And so that's one thing about learning. Another thing that I think is important about learning every day is that it helps open up opportunities. And I kind of alluded that in the conversation side. It helps. The more you know, the more you can relate to somebody, the more opportunities you have in conversation, right? In connecting with somebody on a personal level. But it also helps with, financial opportunities, business opportunities, or whatever your forte is, right? But it helps open doors. And the more you can learn about more things, I personally think the more likely you are to find an industry or find a job or find a business or find a niche that fits you and your strengths. There's kind of two trains of thought that I've found. You have the people that, okay, evaluate your strengths and your weaknesses, be aware of your strengths and work on your weaknesses so that your weaknesses are less weak, right? Or there's the other camp, which is, here's your strengths and your weaknesses, continue to build on your strengths because they're your strengths, so you become the best at what you do, and then outsource what you're weak at. I like the second part. I like to build on my strengths, because honestly, when I work on my weaknesses, typically my weaknesses are things I really don't like to do. And it's just miserable. And I'm like, why am I doing this when I could be doing something I love and I'm good at, and I could become better at it? Why can't I just outsource this part? On a business side anyway. So, so it helps open doors. The more you learn, the more you can relate, the more doors open to you. Why is this important to real estate? Well, it's important on the relationship side, like I touched on, because real estate is a relationship business. Most businesses are, but especially real estate. I mentioned before, I'm sitting down with, all those different people in various different industries that service the real estate community, right? How do I get those meetings? Sometimes I can just ask, and people are like, yeah, sure, absolutely, let's do that. Let's get together for coffee, or let's get together for a meeting. Let's get to, a meeting. Let's have a phone call, whatever, a webinar or Skype call or whatever. But a lot of the time I need to connect with them on some level so that we have some sort of a rapport. And then they're like, oh yeah, you know what? Let's meet. Yeah, I'd be happy to help you out. Like, I like you. I like what you're doing. I like your vision, or, whatever it is, or, I like how you talk to me, or however it is. Let's connect. That's usually how it happens. So there's a relationship side that's so important, because you need to know people to do business in the real estate community. You need to build relationships with people. I think it's very difficult to do anything in any business, but especially in real estate, if you don't actively try and foster relationship and connection. You need to know who to go to when you have a situation, or when you have a scenario, or when you have a certain type of property, right? So I'm looking to buy and hold. But if I have a property that comes across that does not meet my criteria, or that I don't want to move on or can't move on, I might still be able to make money on that deal. I could pass that off and wholesale it to another investor. Or I could pass it off to my realtor and say, hey, why don't you list this? And maybe I get maybe I work out a referral fee. Maybe it's, a couple $100 or something like that. I don't know. Or I wholesale it for a couple of $1,000. I need to know who those people, but if I'm going to wholesale it, I need to know who those buyers are. If I'm going to help, pass it off to somebody to list, I need to know who the realtors are that I want to work with, that I trust, and that we do business the same way. So there's the relationship side. Also, on the opportunity side, you need to, it's important to always be learning, so that when an opportunity presents itself to you, know enough about enough things that you can make a educated decision on those opportunities. Because now you've experienced a lot of, say you've gone out and you've had some doors open, you've tried them out, or you've at least researched them, and you know whether they align with you or not. And that's important, because it's really hard when you have a great opportunity, but you don't know if it aligns with you or not, and what your goals are. And when you don't know if it aligns or not, typically you don't think of whether it aligns or not. So, it's a great opportunity. I'm going to do it. When in reality, you probably should have said no, because it does not align with your ultimate goals. It's a distraction. It's actually taking you away from your ultimate goal. As an example. So I hope that makes sense. I feel like that was maybe a little more convoluted than I meant it to be. Clear as mud. An example of what I'm talking about. I was working for, I guess, easiest way to put it, I was a managing partner for a home care agency. And it was good that I did that for the time that I did it. Because it taught me a lot. It helped teach me about some aspects of business that I had not experienced before. Long story short, it was good for me to do it, but ultimately I came to the realization that it did not align. That business model and the way that business operated did not align with what I wanted to accomplish in life. I did not want to be tied to I did not want to create myself a job long term, if that makes sense. And in the home care business, that's really what it was. Is I had, I would ultimately become a part owner of the agency, and have like shares in the company, but I would be working it every single day. The buck would have to stop with me. Like, I was the person that if it hit the fan, people came to me, which is fine. But in that industry, that's on a daily basis. So it's literally a full-time, more than a full-time job to be running that company. And that's how that structure worked. And that was not something I wanted to do long term. I did not want to be taken away from my family long term. Saturdays at 3 a.m, or Sunday afternoons, whatever it was, or spending 15 hours in the office, whatever it was, on a Monday, whatever. But that I didn't want that type of job, even though it was a phenomenal opportunity. It did not align with the life I wanted to create long term. Could it have morphed into that, way long term? Yeah, potentially. But like probably like the 5 to 10 year plan, it wouldn't align. Maybe like 20 to 30. But I realized there were so many other opportunities that I could create the life I wanted sooner than 10 to 20 years from now. I could create it, 3 to 5 years from now. That was more appealing to me, and it would be able to scale bigger, and yeah, it'd be able to scale bigger than a company that was franchise based where there's territories, right? So anyway, that's an example. That was an opportunity. Now, there were other factors. That's just the short story. I didn't really come to this realization until later. I ended up having to leave because of health reasons. But it was, looking back on it, that was an example of an opportunity that it was actually a blessing that I stepped away, because it did not align with my long-term goals in life, or how I wanted to formulate my life. So I hope that helps. Makes sense. An example I just heard today of opening doors by building relationships and learning a little about a lot, right? I just heard about a guy who is from Montana, and there was a ranch, I believe, down in Wyoming, and his family had been fishing on this ranch for generations. It was like their secret spot, right? They didn't own the ranch, but they always knew the owner, and every time it changed hands, they would go and say, "Hey, we understand you're the new owner of the property. This is who we are. Like, we've been fishing here for generations. We don't bring anybody else up here. Like, we're very respectful of the land, and we tell you when we want to go and all that thing. This is the agreement we had with the last owner. Could we keep that agreement with you?" And for generations, they've been able to do that. Well, this one guy, the ranch changed hand a few times in the last, I don't know, 10 or 20 years. And he'd always made the connection with the person who bought it. It's a very large ranch, like one of the biggest in Wyoming. So the people who kept buying it ended up being wealthier and wealthier and kind of higher status people. But he still just created the relationship. I mean, everybody's got a family. Everybody's got family traditions. A lot of people like fishing. They can relate to that. He found ways for years and having his family for years negotiating this agreement that the family could go fish, and having these people who are buying it, and they're higher and higher quality people, or not necessarily higher quality people, but like higher status people, I should say. he had learned through experience on how to relate to them. And because of that, from my understanding in this story, he was able to continue to negotiate for his family to go fish. But he ultimately, when the last owner of the property wanted to sell, they called him and said, "Hey, we want you to sell the ranch." He's like, and he wasn't even in the real estate industry. He's like, "Well, I'm not in the industry there. Get your realtor's license. We want you to sell the ranch for us." So he quit his job, the guy who goes fishing, and he went and got his real estate license and ended up selling this property. And, it sold for like $65 million or something like that. Now, he was able to recognize the opportunity, and it aligned with his life. And he would not have had that opportunity had he not continued to learn and build relationships. So he knew how to talk to ranch owners. Then he learned how to talk to billionaires. Then he learned how to talk to business owners, and the people that were owning this ranch. So he had built a skill set, or at least a working knowledge of how to talk with people who own property of this size. That provided him the opportunity to sell it. He ended up making, I don't know how much, but say 4 to 6% on $65 million in one deal. Now he's also considered an expert in selling multi-million dollar ranches because he sold one of the biggest ranches in Wyoming. And probably, if it's one of the biggest ranches in Wyoming, it's probably one of the biggest ranches in a 3 to 5 state area. So anyway, he was ready for the opportunity because he had prepared himself to be able to relate to the people that would buy this ranch, right? He'd been, even though it was just to get permission to go fishing, he knew how to appeal to these people. So I hope that makes sense. I hope you see that connection. So I guess just to wrap it up, always be learning. It's important to constantly be learning, whether that's in a book, whether that's talking with people, whether that's doing research online. It's important to constantly be learning. Another thing my granny and my gramps always did was they always put my sister and I in front of people and in situations that made us uncomfortable. And they put us in situations where we were around people that were at a much higher level than we were, and a lot of the time they were adults and we were in like high school or middle school or whatever. And then afterwards it was, politicians. Like as an example, I mentioned my head stuff that I went through after my traumatic brain injury and that recovery process. If you want to know more, go to mytbifight.com or listen to the My TBI Fight podcast. But I for a time I wasn't able to work because of this injury. And coming out of that, I was trying to get back in the game of marketing and networking because I love that, being with people, being in groups. And my granny sent my sister and I to a big political event. And not only just the event, but she bought us tickets to the VIP side of it. So we met with the keynote speaker who's recognized on a national level. We met with him and talked with him for a bit. We were meeting with gubernatorial candidates, congressmen, business owners. There was at least 2 billionaires there, multiple multimillionaires, business owners, politicians, experts, right? Kind of intimidating when you're, in your early 20s. But because they had constantly done things like that for us in the past, where we were meeting with, and we constantly scaled it up, so when we were younger, it was, meeting like with the pastors of some of the bigger churches in town, or, local politicians or small business owners. And then we stepped it up as we got older and we started meeting people on a state level. And now we're meeting people on a national level. You see what I mean? So we were able to constantly, as our skill set grew to converse with these people and to relate with these people, we were able to upgrade the people we were associating with. And that gave us great confidence. And that brings opens up more doors, because now we're associating at an event with some higher status people, some people who have achieved a lot. Well, then other people at the event are seeing that now, and that are local. They're going, oh, hey, 6 months later, like, oh, you were at this event talking with so and so. Oh yeah, you own this business, right? Yeah. Oh, you invest in real estate, right? Yeah. Oh, hey, well, I've got this deal, whatever. And now all of a sudden you have something in common. I think you get it. I'm beating a dead horse. Sorry. Anyway, so going back to what I was saying is that you need to constantly be learning, whether that's going to an event, book, education, whatever. Be like my Grammy. Find ways, find tools like a computer, like your smartphone, like a book, like an event, whatever. Use the tools around you to continue to learn every day. It's not only going to help you in your personal life, it's going to and help elevate you. It's going to elevate the people around you, and it's also going to help open doors. And that's going to help your business, whether that's in the real estate realm or not. So constantly be learning. Change your mindset. Most people don't read a book after high school. A lot of people don't. Change that. Change your mindset. Change the culture that you live in. Be constantly learning. So thank you for joining me. I'll cut it there. I don't want to ramble too long. I sometimes ramble a little bit, so I apologize if I did here, but I hope that made sense. I'm excited for this podcast. This is only episode 2, but I'm very excited for it. I have a good feeling about it. I think that it's, I'm going to continue to get better at this, and content's going to get better. My presentation's going to get better. And as the audience grows, I think it'll be good. I think that, especially with some of the interviews that I'm wanting to do in the future, and some of the topics that I'm working on to talk about more, I think it could be really valuable to the people, not only in my local market, but also in my state. And then hopefully it'll be helpful for people out of the state. They might not get quite as much out of it with some of the content, because some of the content will be pretty specific to Billings, Montana specifically. And then some of the content will be related to Montana specifically, but I think people will still get a lot of value out of it. And that's my hope. I'm excited that you're here to learn alongside with me. So we'll see you next time. If you want to find me, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. If you want to watch this instead of listening to it on a podcast, or if you are watching this, you can listen to it on a podcast. It'll be on iTunes podcast. But my handle for pretty much everything is I think it actually is for everything, is at Luke John Anderson. John is Jon, not John. So Luke Jon Anderson with an SON at the end. That's the handle for pretty much all my social media. So again, if you wanted to find out more about my TBI story, my traumatic brain injury, go to mytbifight.com or at mytbifight, which is the social media handles. So thanks again for joining me. If you found value in this, please share it with your friends or family or whoever you think might find value. We'll see you next time.